The office was a time capsule, a derelict vessel marooned in the great sea of the present. Its ancient wooden panels were filled with indents, each a scar from battles long forgotten. Dusty papers were strewn about in a seeming state of disarray, the old ceiling fan above threatening to scatter them further with every lethargic turn. Daylight angled through the window, casting long and short shadows on the discolored wallpaper, every stain a relic of a coffee-spilled afternoon. At the epicenter of this orchestrated chaos sat Detective Arthur Morgan, as much a fixture of the room as the antiquated rotary phone that clung stubbornly to the edge of his cluttered desk. His granite eyes, aged prematurely by years of treading where angels feared, stared out the window at the fleeting dusk, lost in a sea of thought. The shrill ring of the phone cut through the silence like a knife, shattering the tranquil illusion. He pulled the receiver to his ear with a wary hand, his brow furrowing at the terse information trickling from the other end. Hot Springs, Arkansas, he echoed, the name of the town seeping into his consciousness like a drop of ink in clear water. He could almost see it, an innocuous little town nestled in verdant valleys, oblivious to the storm about to make landfall. A town holding its breath, ensnared by the charisma of a religious leader in a mothballed warehouse. And above all, secrets. 1,000 invisible threads weaving a tapestry too intricate to decipher at a glance. The promise of the case glimmered before him like a distant beacon. It was a chance, a stepping stone to the advancement he'd been longing for, but the undertow of uncertainty pulled at him. He looked at the worn photograph on his desk, the image of a younger, less hardened man staring back at him, taken atop a cliff. The same man who'd since developed a debilitating fear of heights. That photo, a monument to a past he couldn't erase, to a trauma that still clung like a shadow. With a determined sigh, he tucked the photograph into a drawer and made his decision. The fear was there, but so was the unquenchable fire to face it. He rose from his chair, the old leather groaning in protest, and started to gather his things. Hot Springs was calling. As the last vestiges of sunlight were swallowed by the impending night, his office faded into a semi-darkness, a fitting reflection of the ambiguously shadowed path he was about to tread. Hot Springs, an epitome of tranquility wrapped in verdant folds of the land, lay beneath the ever-watchful gaze of the mottled Arkansas sky. From afar, it was a symphony of life, the houses dotted like notes on an orchestra's sheet music. But up close, a harmony of whispers reverberated through its quiet streets, narratives woven through the texture of everyday life. Morgan found himself in the heart of it all, a stranger treading on unfamiliar terrain. The town was unassuming, its veneer of normalcy a paradox to the unfolding mystery. He felt the essence of Hot Springs, like a heartbeat beneath the surface, simultaneously comforting and unsettling. He stood at the threshold of the local church, an architectural relic echoing the town's storied past. The sermon was in progress, the religious leader's words imbued with the mystique of a born charmer. His voice was soft yet resonant, and it filled the church with a spectral enchantment, drawing in the faithful like a beacon. There was something there behind those captivating eyes, an echo of something profound, something hidden. Post-sermon, he decided to blend into the fabric of the crowd, his detective's instinct surfacing. He introduced himself to the locals, his inquiries masked as amiable chatter. Each conversation was a window into their lives, a mosaic of fear and devotion interlaced. Underneath the reverence, Morgan felt the underlying tremor of unease. As the day folded into a cloak of star-studded twilight, he found himself observing the infamous warehouse from a safe distance. The old structure stood like a derelict phantom, the faintest hint of strange shadows disappearing into its gaping maw. He could see the water tower nearby, a prime vantage point, yet a chilling reminder of his acrophobia. His heart pounded in his chest, a deafening drum against the quiet of the night. Choosing prudence over audacity, he retreated to his temporary lodgings. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, of theories that tugged at the fringes of his understanding. He knew the depths of this case held something far more complex than a detective's standard fare. His dreams were haunted by the religious leader's captivating gaze, the eerie warehouse, and a dizzying fall from the water tower that seemed to echo his past trauma. The sun stood aloof in the azure expanse of the sky, its fierce glare mellowing into a delicate warmth. Amid the sounds of the town coming to life, the deserted warehouse lurked in eerie silence. A relic of forgotten times, it brooded under the weight of 100 secrets, its enigmatic aura swallowing the sunlight like a parched beast. Morgan stood at its threshold, a solitary figure dwarfed by the monstrous edifice. He took a moment to steel himself, breathing in the stark emptiness. The wind whispered strange melodies as it whistled through the cracked walls, a spectral orchestra playing a symphony only he could hear. Pushing open the heavy door, the detective stepped into the musty darkness, his eyes tracing the faint outlines of dusty crates and broken machinery. He flicked on his flashlight, its beam slicing through the gloom, revealing strange symbols etched onto the walls, cryptic and ancient. Each symbol seemed to pulse with an unspoken energy, a language only the initiated could decipher. His heart echoed with a distant drumbeat of cosmic dread. A particular symbol caught his attention, an inky spiral radiating outwards, a haunting mimicry of a galaxy. He took out his notepad, sketching the symbol, his mind processing its possible implications. A rusted incense burner lay overturned nearby, the residue of an alien aroma lingering. He found a robe too, crimson as the eye of a setting sun, adorned with more of the symbols. The atmosphere of the warehouse was an entity in itself, its unseen tendrils curling around his being. The persistent chill teased his senses, and the whisper of the wind felt like a secret conversation he wasn't privy to. An uncanny sensation of being watched lingered, like invisible eyes scrutinizing his every move. He found himself shivering, not from the cold, but from an alien dread seeping into his marrow. That night, Morgan's dreams were infested by the warehouse. The symbols danced in front of his eyes, warping and twisting, their meaning just beyond his grasp. He fell endlessly into the inky spiral, an echo of his acrophobia transforming into a fear of something far larger and more dreadful. The robe draped over him like a crimson death shroud, suffocating his senses, drowning him in its foreign scent. He woke up with a start, his scream a mere gasp, a prisoner trapped within his throat. Moonlight peeked through the curtain window, casting a ghastly pallor over his sweat-soaked form. He sat up, gasping for air, his heart thudding wildly against his ribcage. The symbols from the warehouse pulsated in his mind, a twisted song echoing through the hollow chambers of his psyche. Morgan, sitting in the dimly lit confines of his temporary lodgings, felt the tendrils of reality and the unthinkable merging into a maddening kaleidoscope. His mind was a spinning dervish, dancing on the edge of comprehension as he meticulously pieced together the elaborate puzzle. The enigmatic symbols, the crimson robe, and the disquieting atmosphere of the warehouse were elements of a broader tableau that unveiled itself like a cosmic ballet. His investigation led him down obscure paths, unearthing forbidden texts and clandestine practices. He came to understand that the charismatic religious leader was not merely a shepherd to his congregation, but a high priest of a secret cult. A cult that revered an entity not from ancient tomes, but from the void of cosmic infinity. The revelation was a thunderclap in his world, resonating with an unbearable dread. The man he'd heard preaching compassion was a puppet master, pulling the strings that made them dance to the tunes of an otherworldly horror. He confronted the religious leader, his detective's mask replaced with an accuser's resolve. The leader only smiled, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling calm. He extended an offer of enlightenment, a promise of revelation that Morgan had no intention of accepting. As the detective delved deeper, he became the eye of a storm he wished he'd never stirred. The cult, becoming aware of his intrusion, decided to intervene. Late one evening, as twilight whispered tales of approaching darkness, they ambushed him. The chase was a chaotic dance, twisting through the labyrinthine streets of Hot Springs. It led him up a winding hill, his acrophobia whispering silent threats, a cruel echo of the heights he feared. His heart pounded against his ribs like a frantic bird against a living cage. But he kept on, propelled by adrenaline and a desperate need to survive. His escape was a narrow shave, the teeth of the beast grazing his coattails as he burst out onto the overlooking cliff. He doubled over, panting, his fear of heights momentarily dwarfed by the reality of his situation. As he glanced back at the town, its innocent facade marred by the shadow of the cult, he felt a sense of foreboding. He was not just against the cult, but against an entity that transcended his understanding. A heavy pall of despair hung over Hot Springs. Even the usually ebullient bird song sounded like a mournful dirge, and the wind whispered a melancholic lament. Morgan stood in the throes of a terrible dawn, the comforting blanket of his worldview torn asunder, leaving him in the chilling grip of a horrifying reality. Each passing moment was a crucible, tempering his spirit, fueling a defiant resilience. The town was in the grip of an entity whose power rippled from an abyss beyond the veil of known cosmos. He realized he was but a mote in the vast machinery of existence, his investigation merely scratching the surface of a grand cosmic horror. His confrontation with the cult was an ominous dance. He was surrounded, the charismatic leader at the forefront, his gaze a terrible promise of impending doom. Morgan could see the fervor in their eyes, a burning testament to their devotion. The leader's words echoed in the eerie silence, a dark prayer inviting the cosmic entity into their realm. As the group began their ritualistic chant, the air around them hummed with unseen energy. Reality quivered, and a nebulous void gaped in the air above them, a door to the cosmic abyss. He felt an oppressive wave of terror washing over him, a visceral confirmation of his worst fears. The entity was no mere belief, it was a pulsating reality, its essence seeping into his world. Just as he thought he was at the end, he found himself seized by a rush of adrenaline. His instincts screamed at him, a primal urge to survive. With a burst of unexpected energy, he threw himself into a breakneck sprint, darting away from the gathering. The chase was a surreal blur, his fear of heights forgotten in the face of a greater horror. He could hear the cultists behind him, their chants a thunderous tide riding on the currents of the wind. The sprint ended as abruptly as it started, with Morgan tumbling down a concealed slope, landing onto the banks of a secluded creek. The cultists lost his trail, their distant chants swallowed by the whispering winds. Panting heavily, Morgan took refuge in the creeping shadows of the dense woods, his heart pounding a desperate rhythm of escape. He made his way back to his office under the shroud of darkness. His body was unscathed, but his mind was marred by the scars of cosmic horror. His career advancement seemed a trivial pursuit now, an empty goal in the face of an unthinkable reality. As he sat alone in the dim light, a shell-shocked survivor in the aftermath of a cosmic catastrophe, the magnitude of his escape hit him. He had fled, but the entity remained, a lurking nightmare in the heart of Hot Springs. He had been a pawn in a game too vast to comprehend, a witness to a reality he wished was mere fantasy. His escape had not been from the cult alone, but from the embrace of a horror that spanned across the unfathomable cosmos. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed our content, show your support with a like and subscribe, and stay notified by hitting the bell icon. Expect more cosmic horror from Eldritch Tales Factory, and feel free to explore our other stories. See you in the next video.